All right. Let's get this out of the way first. The thoughts, views, and opinions expressed on Tailboard Talks Firefighter podcast are solely those of the speakers, guests, and host, and do not in any way represent the thoughts or views or opinions of any other employer, partnership, or sponsor. The material and information in this podcast is for general information purposes only and should be used at the listener's discretion.
Here comes the intro. Skip forward 30 seconds if you want to get right to the episode. This is the Tailboard Talk podcast, the best health, wellness, and lifestyle resource for the fire service. We're using stories, lessons, and tips from the front lines to give a realistic view of what the job can do to us and how we can make it out alive. I'm Chris Morella, a firefighter since 03, medic since 05, full-time since 08, and promoted to lieutenant in 20. I'm also a personal trainer and strength coach, and I'm here to give you the best information and host the best discussions to make us capable and durable, both on the job and away from it. So grab a heater, steal some fancy creamer from First Shift, and let's go chat. Well, let's start that over again. Hey everybody, welcome to Tailboard Talks, Firefighter podcast, a First Shift fitness thing. My name's Chris. I'm here, and I'm here in our new mobile recording studio, otherwise known as the camper. I'm in the camper because we're leaving tomorrow morning early, and it's actually kind of the perfect thing. It's quiet. There's nobody here. Sawyer's upstairs taking a nap. Nathan's having lunch. Katie's inside. So even the garage isn't safe. But here we are. We're in the camper, and I've toyed around the idea of doing like a she shed in the past, but I thought like there's no way. That's too small. That would be uncomfortable. But the camper's only 20 feet long, like end to end, and I'm fitting in it pretty well with this stuff. So I might have a little she shed plan in the future for a recording studio because, man, having a studio would be so cool. I've talked to Katie and Kurt about it. Having some place to go that's like quiet and separate from the house, awesome. Building a barn that could be a gym and a recording studio isn't in the cards for where we live. Maybe something to think about in the future. So today's episode, I'm not sure where it's going to go. I know where it's going to start. It's going to start with mindfulness and some stories because I've had a few, not once in a career calls for sure, but once in a not very often calls in the past 3 or 4 shifts. I've had 3 pretty significant calls. And I've reacted differently to 2 of them as I did the one yesterday. The one yesterday I did not have a good time with. The previous 2 were pretty interesting. So I'm going to preface this with saying the impetus for this, the reason I picked this topic was because today on the Spring for Change page, I posted the emotional wheel or the emotions wheel. And I talked about that a couple episodes ago. And it's basically a way to put your feelings and your emotions into words. And then there's an outer ring, there's a middle ring, a center ring. Some of them have several more layers upon them and other formats of it. But essentially you get to pick what you're feeling. So let's say, wait, let me look at it. Oh, did I leave it somewhere? Okay. Let's say you're feeling, let's say you're feeling confident, okay? You're like, I feel really good about myself. And you're like, I feel confident right now. I wonder what my core emotion is from that. Well, if you go on the emotion wheel, confident is in the outer ring, okay? And then it traces back to proud. And that traces back to happy. And happy is one of the core emotions in there. And you can do that with good stuff and or bad or negative stuff. Now the larger, like the established concept of this says there's 8 core emotions, and it builds off of that. But if you go and if you just Google emotion wheel or feelings wheel, there's a bunch of different versions of it with a bunch of different terminology on it. The idea is the same though, right? You're going to take what's pretty easily identifiable and trace it back to what is the kind of the basis or the root of that thing. And it was pretty funny because when I was doing it, first I looked up emotion wheel, because that's what Christy Lister and I talked about a few episodes back. She said, it's an emotion wheel. I did that. And up came a ton of adolescent, kindergarten, pre-K printables. And when you look at this thing, it's color-coded. You know, there's different emotions have different colors. And I was like, man, here I am, basically back in pre-K now with Nathan. We're using colors and words to talk about our emotions. It's something we're trying to teach him now. And here I am as a 38-year-old professional, and that's what I'm going back to. So maybe, hopefully in the future, I'll save him a little bit of heartache if we can establish some of this stuff. But just a funny little revelation as I was looking this stuff up. So here's my calls. Okay, first one. Imagine this. And if you're not a paramedic, stick with me. If you are a paramedic, don't critique me. Okay, these are tough calls. We go to a casino in town, and we go down there, and there's a guy sitting at the table who, and I know he looked like this because this is the first thing I said when we walked in. I said, this guy's going to die. He looked terrible. He looked gray, super gray, and just something to keep in the back of your mind. If someone looks gray, it can usually be a cardiac thing. Okay, they're not perfusing. Gray is different than pale. Gray is gray, and you'll know it when you see it. He was gray. He was extremely sweaty, and he was actively holding his chest, right? So we figure, okay, he's probably been down here for a while. He's probably having a heart attack. Ask him how he's feeling. No pain, but a strange sensation. He can't catch his breath. Something's wrong. He doesn't know quite what. Maybe tension, maybe a little bit of pressure, but not really. So we start going through the ACS protocol. We do give him aspirin. We start to look for a line. We're going to treat this guy in the basement because he needs care immediately. Hooking up the 12 lead, and as soon as the limb leads get on, we see that this is very clearly VTach with a pulse. Now, if you've never seen that before in the field, up until last week, I was with you. I've seen it in training. We drill it often, but seeing VTach on the monitor and then seeing someone talk to you, struggling as he was it was strange. Okay, so stress goes up. Complicated call now. We're starting to draw amiodarone. I'm going to skip a lot of the finer details of this thing, but as we're drawing amiodarone, getting ready to hang the second bag, he starts trying to throw up. And I said, yeah, man, for what your heart's doing right now, you should feel like you want to throw up. So if you got to throw up, I get it. Go for it. We gave him a bag. He started trying to throw up. And in the midst of that action, he actually converted himself. So we scrapped the amiodarone. We're not going to hang that right now because that's over a longer time infusion. We're going to make sure he's perfusing better and his symptoms are relieving. Then we're going to get to the ambulance and go to phase 2 of this care. So he says he feels a lot better. We're in the ambulance. He converts again. Now he's in a flutter. He converts again. Now he's in a fib, but he's perfusing well. He's not at the SVT level like we thought he was before, so his rate's low enough as like 130, 120. He's perfusing well. The fact of the matter is it really didn't do anything, right? We were prepared to do several things. We had amiodarone drawn and mixed in a bag. We had a denocard pulled, but we didn't have to administer it because he dropped below the 160 rate and he was perfusing well. And so we just did supportive care. We ran a couple 12 leads, checked all the boxes, make sure he was good, and got him to the hospital, right? But stressful call. Seeing VTach with a pulse is a thing, right? So after that call, I felt pretty good. Not because we actually did anything. Like, that's the funny, like, fall from grace when you're at the hospital, kind of writing your report, like, I have very few interventions to write down right now because you don't get credit for almost doing something. So it's like the amiodarone didn't happen. I can put in the narrative, but you're not going to put prepared amiodarone as a skill when you don't use it. You put administered things. There's things that you performed, right? But it was like, man, we did a good job recognizing that and knowing what we had to do to treat it, but that's not how the call went. He converted himself. He kept converting down, and he was stable by the time we got there. So I felt pretty good about that we were put under the gun and did a good job as a crew and as individuals. We figured it out, right? Second call, go to a business for the person who fell and hit their head. And admittedly, me and my partner rolling out, the CAD notes just said bleeding a little from the head, or bleeding near the face was exactly what it said, bleeding near the face. And then like callers on the line, person is responsive, all the baseline stuff. So we didn't think too terribly much of it. We got there, and she was laying in a lagoon of blood. I mean, there was so much blood. There's the expected amount of blood for a head trauma, right? For smacking your head on something and having a cut on your scalp. There's that expected amount of blood. And then there's what this lady had. She had so much blood all around her. Now, it's just me and my partner, and a lot of blood isn't a big deal because we all know how blood can grossly misrepresent itself in terms of volume, right? You can take 10 cc's of blood or fluid and squirt it on the ground. It looks like a huge puddle or a huge pool. However, we both estimated around 500 cc's were out of this lady's head by the time we got there. Compounding it, I'm just going to talk about some gory details. She had such long hair. She had hair down to like the middle of her back. This is probably a 55, 57-year-old woman, I think. Down to the middle of her back, and it was completely full, like a giant Brillo pad of blood. It was like straight kind of blonde hair, and it was just chock full of blood. So much so, imagine this, we go to put the C-collar on her, and I scooped her hair with a towel and wrapped it like a hair wrap, and then wrung it out to kind of contain it all and put it on top of her head. And as I was moving the hair, it was actively soaking through the towel. We're talking some blood, right? She had a cut near her temple, some pretty diffuse but pronounced swelling to the right side of her head, right around the cut. They said that she passed out and smacked her head on a counter and then was unconscious for about 10 seconds and then woke up and has been trying to stand up the whole time. So we asked her, like, well, why did she pass out? Well, when she gets stressed out, she just passes out from time to time. It's something that happens. Immediate red flag, right? That's not just something that happens. So she's actively trying to get up the whole time. She's trying to sit up, trying to stand up. Lots of repetitive question asking, obviously concussed, and she's got this little bit of blood loss going on. We end up getting a collar on her, getting her on the cot, laying her supine, getting in the ambulance, and she's the whole time, I don't want to go, what happened, why am I covered in blood, repetitive question asking kind of stuff. Get her in the ambulance, we got to do a 12 lead on her because she passed out. As my partner's putting the leads on her, I look at the monitor, and he puts the limb leads on, and all I see is a rate of 30. And at that point, you got to say, hey, what's going on? So I tapped her on the shoulder, and no response, right? She's trying to open her eyes a little bit. She's responsive, kind of verbal. She'll kind of flutter her eyes a little bit. Groans to painful, right? So we're working down the Glasgow coma scale here. Immediately, so this is nothing that anyone knew, right? We went through all the baseline checks or asked questions in the business, and her son was there. Does she have any cardiac history, medical history? Has she been sick lately? No allergies. She's not on any kind of cardiac medications. She might have long COVID, but that's it. Adamant about that being her only medical history, and she's got no medications. So immediately we go to pacing. Right. In my brain, I'm like, we don't have time for drugs. There's no line established. We got to get some electric therapy going in this thing to keep her heart going quickly. So we start doing supportive care, ventilating, and I get the pads on her and we start pacing. She responded to 30 milliamps at a rate of 60, which is the default setting on her monitor. So she responds to that, right? And immediately we get a radial pulse that's strong and at the pace of 60, and then immediately it goes up. Shortly after that, I should say, it goes up to like 80. So she's doing the work also now. We're being redundant with these electrical pulses and her natural rhythm. But in our SMOs, you can't discontinue pacing once you start, no matter how confident you feel that she's doing well. But now she's conversational. She's opening her eyes again, back to repetitive question asking. Long story short, she's all good. But in the moment, we have someone with a significant head trauma, altered mental status all of a sudden, and also a severe decrease in heart rate, severe bradycardia. Where does that come from? Did she have the cardiac issue before, or does she have increased ICP? Does she have increased intracranial pressure, and that's causing all these things to happen, right? Stressful call, turned out well, felt pretty good. I felt pretty good that we were able to pivot that quickly, that we were able to mitigate the scene. Now, also, I should say, I called for the engine to come help us because it was a mess, and we just needed someone to babysit her with me in the back of the ambulance to keep her calm because, she, like I said, she was actively trying to be active. So when that engine showed up, I pulled two of their people and they were helping with all this stuff. We got some lines en route, all kinds of preventative and supportive measures in place. But it felt pretty good. Okay, so it's 2 calls now. It's 2 stressful calls. Felt pretty good. I haven't paced. I paced once before in the past 15 years of where I work. And it was a long time ago. And it was stressful then, right? So twice now in 15 years I've paced. Once now in 15 years where I am, I've seen VTach with a pulse. 2 stressful calls, both turned out well. I felt good about both, right? I felt confident. I felt happy. I felt like, okay, this training paid off. We were called out by a patient, basically, and we did well. We had the tools to fix what we needed to and provide the best level of care possible, and we did. Now, yesterday, okay? Yesterday's different. Yesterday, we got called into someone else's district for a sick person, and the CAD note said sick for a week, headache, coughing, nausea, vomiting. So right away I'm thinking like flu, right? Because COVID's kind of slowed down a little bit. There's still version 1 out there wreaking havoc with some people, but by and large, we're in a pretty good spot. We get there. She looks sick, right? Pale, not gray, but pale, and working hard to breathe. So we get her in the ambulance, give her some oxygen, still working hard to breathe. Now, in the back of my mind, she's got an inconsistent story of why she thinks she's sick. She thought it started with an ear infection, maybe a sinus infection, doesn't know really what's going on here. She works in a nursing home. She's kind of sketching around with where she thinks she got sick and her symptoms. Every time I ask her to describe her symptoms, she does, but then when I ask her specifically, she'll admit to something else. I think she's probably tired and confused from being sick for 5 days. Probably a little bit hypoxic, but we got to treat her. So we do our 12 because she says she's a little bit of dizziness. Do our 12 lead, comes back with nothing, and go en route to the hospital. And we got our capnography on. I noticed a pretty distinct shark fin. So we're going to do a nebulizer treatment. We're going to do a combi vent of albuterol and ipratropium. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, man, this is different because I haven't done one of these in a while. During COVID, we stopped doing that because they figured out, the concern was that when you use a nebulizer and you essentially make the particles smaller, you have a greater risk of transmission and catching COVID. So even somebody with wheezing, we had different protocols during COVID if it was considered to be respiratory. So we're giving this albuterol treatment, about 10, 12-minute transport, and she responds a little bit, but not quite as much as I want her to, or she's up to like 94, which is good compared to where she was in like the 80s, but still she's struggling, right? Worker breathing is still there, but she's completing her neb on her own. She's sustaining that without my assistance. So in the back of my mind, I'm like, this feels like something gross. Go back a few hours later, and full-blown COVID, right? Heavy duty. Don't know which version. I'm going to say heavy-duty version 1 COVID. She looked sick, and she was sick. She was eventually, after we left her, admitted with pneumonia and COVID. That brought a whole other batch of feelings. So that brought me right back to like 2 years ago when we were in the throw of this thing. And I got pretty, not upset, but I was like frustrated and very annoyed and very resentful. Not to her. She was exceptionally kind and sweet and just wanted help. And that's where my frustration kind of came into play. I needed to provide the best care possible, but I understood that it was going to put myself at risk depending on what she was sick with, right? And it brought me back to feeling like every time I was on the ambulance at work, I was at risk of bringing something back to Katie and the kids and getting them sick and putting them in jeopardy. Like, no matter what has happened in the past year and a half or year of me being confident that the worst is probably over it, me seeing the kids be sick a bunch more times since then. Katie and I have both been sick. I've been through COVID 2 or 3 times now. We've cleared all these hurdles with relatively no major issues, right? And I should have the wealth of that confidence in the back of my head of like, you know what, even if she does have something like COVID, I know I've been through it a handful of times and the kids are good. This will be an annoyance, but not a big deal. Was what the odds are, right? But man, it kicked me right back. It kicked me right back in the throes of it when we were really going through it, and I was really in probably the worst days of my career. Like, I remember specifically saying to myself and out loud, like, I wish I was a electrician now. I don't want to do this job right now. It was not cool, and it just popped me right back in it. As soon as I heard she had COVID, it popped me right back in it. And I felt a couple things. And after thinking about it, I trace it back to a few things. The first one is the timing, okay? The timing of this patient with severe COVID and me taking care of her for 10 to 15 minutes in the back of an ambulance with a nebulizer happens 2 days before we go on vacation. So I'm thinking like, man, I'm going to be in the camper. I'm going to be in a shoebox with Katie and the kids for a week. If I get sick, I don't know how I'm going to be able to stay away from them. And besides that, I just don't want to be sick on vacation. Like, we've been looking forward to this. This is our first camping trip out. The last thing I want to do is be coughing and sick and just feel like I'm a threat, right? Or I'm dragging the group down, or we're just going to waste this vacation because I feel like crap. The second one is the context of why we went to a different district to take a call. Now, we covered a different district in that call because someone was retaking a test. And in the grand scheme of things, I'm very happy they retook it because they put in a ton of work. They put in good work the first time, didn't do well, but put a ton of work in the second time. So in the grand scheme of things, they're far, far, far better off now than they were if they had passed it barely the first time. Okay, huge positive that they retook it and did very well. But immediately there's resentment there of like, hey man, if you could have passed this freaking thing the first time, I wouldn't be here right now. You'd be covering your own calls. There'd be no retest today, and I'd be sitting in the station right now. You'd be dealing with the COVID lady. And that's a very harsh statement to say, but it's very real, right? And I don't feel great saying it, but it's absolutely how I feel. It's also unrealistic because if he had passed the test the first time, who knows what I'd be doing right now on my ambulance or what he'd be doing. He might be on another call, right? You can't say that it's going to be, if it wasn't this exact scenario, it would absolutely be this one. I mean, that's what happens when you're frustrated. You like to project those things and predict those things and build that reality against yourself, right? That absolute, this would have been this way if that had happened, but that's not true. Like, who knows what could have been happening right now? The other part of it is the context, right? It's a sick person that brought me back. She represented and she looked like and embodied and acted like all the people that we had to take care of it during COVID. And that just swept me right back into it. Now, this is where I'm not sure where I'm going with this. I don't know where I'm going with it. How about that? And I think it was exceptionally timely that I posted the feelings wheel today because I needed it yesterday. Like, trying to figure out what I was feeling and why I was so frustrated. And despite dealing with, dozens of sick people in the past year and a half, why this one frustrated me so much and got to me. And, I went through those couple things, right? It was the timing before vacation. It was the context of it of like, I'm going to run someone else's call right now. It was a sick person herself that brought me back and put me in that state of mind. But those are all like independent things. Like, those are things that if I was just showing up to work next day, I wouldn't be any more comfortable. But I put this weird scenario around the timing and the context of it. So this is what I said. I don't know where this is going, and I hope you're sticking with me. I hope it's maybe giving you guys something. So I wrote down a couple more notes because I knew I was going to stall out here, and so I wrote some stuff down. One of the lessons I wrote down was being aware is number one, and then mitigating is number two. And sometimes we try to mitigate before we know what we're trying to mitigate. And this is kind of the work I tried to do today and yesterday, of like figuring out why I felt this way and what exactly I was feeling before I tried to fix it. And that's uncomfortable because you got to be uncomfortable. You got to go into that uncomfortable place and dig deeper into it to figure out exactly what you want to fix. But otherwise, you're just kind of like, you're throwing generic fixes at a very specific problem. Sometimes that works. I'm not going to totally shit on that and say it doesn't work all the time. You can just feel, I don't know why I'm not feeling so great, or I'm just generally stressed, and you can go work out, or you can do some self-care stuff, and that can help, right? That can actually absolutely help. But for this particular one, I felt like I needed to figure out why, because it was so different than the past year where I've been dealing with sick people. This one just got to me. So being aware and mindful is one, and then mitigating is number two. I'm going to bring it back to that emotions wheel, that feelings wheel, right? Because that's something that makes you mindful, makes you aware. It makes you kind of look at what you're feeling, traces back to one of the core emotions. Then you get to look at that and say, why am I so afraid of this? And the answer can be because I don't want to get my family sick. And I know the ultimate result of severe sickness, right? Like, I know what that is. I've seen it a lot. It's certainly not a point of bragging, but I understand what the result of severe illness and injury is. So if there's a chance that I could be the reason that comes back to my household, I don't want it. I'm afraid of that. Like, I openly and will openly say I fear that. But if I just say I'm frustrated because I had to take stupid District 1 calls, that doesn't acknowledge that and really let me start figuring that out. Or at least, I shouldn't say even me figuring it out. It doesn't give me the ability to take that now to someone that can help me figure it out. I'm going to cut this one off because I'm losing, not steam. I feel good talking about this stuff. I feel like the lessons were good, and I hope the stories were cool enough for you for some EMS nerd stuff. But I'm going to leave you with that wheel of emotion, that wheel of the feelings wheel, the color-coded feelings wheel that we teach kids in pre-K, and now a 38-year-old is trying to figure it out. Good job, me. I am a professional. Listen, if you like the show, if you like what's going on, go to the affiliate links. That's one easy way to show your support. Listen, if you don't want any non-alcoholic beer or CBD, shoot me a message. Say, hey, what's up? Let me know if this kind of episode resonates with you, because I feel like maybe it does for some people, but I don't know. I mean, I talk to the guys in my station or my department, obviously, right? But my department's big enough where you can stay inside that universe forever if you want to. You never have to branch out to any other fire service environment if you don't want to. It's also small enough where everybody knows your business. So, interesting little dynamic there, but let me know if you like it. I hope you guys dig it. I'm going to pack up the camper. Got to pack up the studio, pack up the camper, we're going on vacation. We'll talk to you guys soon.